Well, I'm really happy to do this introduction because these two people have been personal friends for many, many years, and they have been really great friends and collaborators of Hogan for many, many years. So I'm really thrilled to have them here. So let me start with introducing Dianne Nilsen. Diane's a PhD in IO from Minnesota. Yay. And her personality, interests, and roots go way back. Her dissertation actually was on the relationship between personality and executive performance. She was at CCL, a firm we all know very well, for 10 years. Authored the Benchmarks, which is their Executive 360, was a coach and facilitator in their leadership development program, and published several other psychometric instruments also. So great background there. She also spent 10 years at PDI, which is now Korn Ferry. And at PDI, she served as VP and practice leader for their leadership development products, which was a fantastic business when she ran it. And and she was also at various times vice president of research and vice president of client solutions. So really broad, practical, applied background as well as academic background. She also was, for 4 years, COO of a company called Questar, which is a firm that provides customer management technology systems for the retail industry and the restaurant chains. Several years ago, she joined Gordy as a partner in Curphy Leadership Solutions, and primarily focuses on executive assessment and coaching in that work. She and Gordy most recently have collaborated on a new book called Ignition, which is coming very soon. So that's Dianne, and Gordy Curphy is the other half of this dynamic duo. And Gordy has a background with U.S. Air Force Academy. His bachelor's degree is from there. He's got a master's in IO from St. Mary's and a PhD in IO from the University of Minnesota, and has spent 30 years doing research, practice, teaching, consulting on leadership. He's written 19 books, sold over 100,000 books, is the co-author of the #1 used leadership textbook called Leadership Enhancing the Lessons of Experience. It's in its 8th edition today. 450 colleges and universities in the US, Canada, Europe, India, China have adopted this. It's the #1 selling textbook on leadership. As a practitioner, Gordy's had a number of leadership positions with the US Air Force Academy, CCL also, Blandin Foundation, Korn Ferry International. He's led startups, he's run turnarounds, he's done major organizational change initiatives, rapid growth companies. As a consultant, he's done several thousand executive assessments, 200 senior team sessions designed to deliver hundreds of coaching and leadership development programs. So that ought to convince you that we have some real expertise in front of the room today, as well as being friends. They are really the best of the science practitioner model in the IO field, and we're really proud to have them. So,
well, thank you.
Just didn't see that, did it?
Well, thank you for having us. Gordy and I are really excited to be here today, and we're very honored. We've been treated so nicely by all of you. So we're here to talk primarily about our work with teams today. And I want to start out by maybe linking this back to leadership. So I'm sure that you've all heard that the base rate of managerial incompetence is really high. I mean, Bob, you've done a lot of research on this. 65%, I think, is a number that you come up with. So a lot of bad leaders out there. There's also a lot of bad teams. And research consistently shows that only about 1 in 5 teams is considered high-performing. Okay, so there's a lot of teams out there that aren't really working as effectively as they could. And in addition to having underperforming teams, there's just also a lot of teams, right? So everybody is on at least one team. And many people now, especially in matrix organizations, are on multiple teams. And there was a research study that was done in 2016 that said 1 out of 4 people claim to be on at least 4 teams at any one time, right? So they're on maybe their team with their boss, they could be on cross-functional teams or project teams, ad hoc teams. So when you look at the number of teams out there and how they are really not operating very effectively, that's a lot of lost productivity. And it's a big opportunity, I mean, for all of us, right, in this room to really help solve organizational teamwork issues. So that's what we want to talk about today. We're going to really kind of feature 2 different lenses on working with teams and how we bring these 2 different lenses together in our practice. And so we're going to walk through 3 different scenarios of our consulting work with teams. So one is working with an intact team, a leadership team. We'll talk about helping team leaders be better at building teams, and then also considering how to consider the ability to build teams when you're looking at high potential identification. So we are both industrial organizational psychologists by training. So there's the I and the O.
Wait 1 second.
Yes.
Sorry. If you're on Skype, can you mute your mic, please? We can hear somebody's audio.
They're all muted.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so the individual differences perspective is really important because teams are made up of people, right? Oh, that seemed to sound good.
Turn it back on.
So teams are made up of people, and people, and what people bring to the team affects both their individual contribution to the team, but also kind of influences team dynamics. So, people show up with values, that affects the team. So I was working with an HR leadership team who had really a bimodal distribution of values when it came to, some of them were like very high tradition, high security needs, and they really did not embrace change. And then, new leader, a few new people came in, and they were low security, low tradition, and wanted to change everything up. So you can imagine on that team there was a lot of conflict and difficulty into how much change, how quickly they put forth change. So another aspect of individual differences that contribute to team functioning, right, is just basic personality. Is anyone on the team going to take charge? Does everybody on the team try to take charge? So there's dynamics there. And then the dark side also contributes to maybe where teams get stuck. And one of the things that we commonly see on top leadership teams is, we'll say leisurely, where everybody sits in the room and they have I see Bob poking there, everybody agrees, right? And they have these polite conversations in the executive or the boardroom, and then they leave and they really don't follow through, but they fail to have the right conversations in the room. And so that's something that we actually see pretty often. So individual differences are important for team functioning, but there's another model that we bring to looking at teams, and that's more of the team processes and practices. So outside of the individuals in the room, there are certain things that teams need to do to be effective. And so we're going to talk about how we bring both of those to the picture in our consulting practice. All right, so I did walk around today and I saw a number of you had the Rocket Model book out, trying to suck up to us that you were looking at our book.
Got the memo.
You got the memo. I don't know if you read the book. I'll assume you didn't all have a chance. Wait for the new one that's coming out like in a month or so. But anyway, I just want to walk you through a little bit about the model that we use in looking at team functioning. I'll say that Gordy really gets credit for the model because remember I just joined a couple years ago, so I'm influencing maybe some adjustments and tweaks to the model, but he's really the author of the model and gets credit for putting it together. So he really did a good literature review, looked at all the stuff that was out there on teams, and also looked at what he knew from his own work with teams and built this model. So you'll see that there at the bottom of the model, you can read that, is context. And so all teams exist within a context that has an impact on them, right? It could be, what do their customers expect? What are their competitors up to? What's going on in the industry? Are there any laws that are changing that could affect the team? So it's really important for teams to take stock of what people believe about the context that they're in. So I'll go back to that HR leadership team as an example. So on that team, there were people who were centers of expertise people. And what they thought that the customers, their internal customers, needed in this organization was best practice. We need to bring really the best thinking, the latest work, and have really great, sound, valid solutions. That's how we're going to add value. Now, the people who were the business unit HR partners had a totally different perspective on what customers wanted. And what they thought customers wanted was a lot of flexibility, customization. You need to be able to adjust the solutions to the needs of what what my business units really want. And so again, when you think about that HR leadership team and how they were, when they came together, they had really different assumptions about what people were expecting out of them. All right. So another aspect of the team functioning that needs to be in place for a team to be effective is you need to have a clear mission. I mean, it just seems so obvious that the team needs to know, like, what are we trying to accomplish here? What are our goals? What does success mean? And not only that, but do we actually have a plan and strategy that we agree on that's going to allow us to accomplish that? So no matter who's on the team, you have to have that mission. The next component of the rocket model is talent. So talent would include things like, do you have clear roles and responsibilities? Do people on that team know how they're going to contribute to the team's success? Does the team have the right number of people? One of the things that we see with executive teams is they're overly inclusive. And you start having this executive team with 20, 25 really big egos in the room, it's really hard to get anything done. So the team size needs to be right. Team structure is important. Another aspect of talent here, of course, is do people have the right knowledge, skills, and abilities? Do they bring that with them? And there's also the personality aspect, and I think that's where the two lenses overlap here. So beyond talent then is norms. So teams need to have the right rules of the road for working together effectively. And very often, I'll say teams have rules. They haven't thought through, are these the right rules? Are they going to really help us get things done? So rules are around how does the team communicate? How do they make decisions? How do they hold each other accountable? So very often these norms just kind of happen rather than being deliberate about, are these the right way to get things done? All right, next component of the model is buy-in. Everyone on the team really needs to buy into the team mission, and they need to be committed to doing their part, and that's really important as well. Next is resources. So the team needs to have the right tools. They need the right space, they need the right data, the right information, they need the right budget, they need the right, I'll say, political support in order to be successful. The next component in the model is courage, and this is one that we have made some changes to. It used to be called morale. And morale suggests, like, we kind of like all love each other and we're happy together, and of course that's good, but the thing that we want to really emphasize by calling this courage is that people need to show up and have the right conversations. They need to feel safe about expressing disagreement. Okay, so that's kind of why we changed it. All right, and then last, if all those things are in place, you get some results out of the team. So that's the rocket model. I'm going to say that, in addition to the model, we've got an assessment, a team assessment that's based on the model and provides feedback about those components. And then the other thing that I will mention as someone who's, relatively new to working in the team space is that we have 40 different activities and tools that are really designed to help teams improve in these areas. So, if a team's, really lousy on meeting management or something around norms, we actually have activities to help the team get better. So I really appreciate that Gordy has assembled all those tools. We have assessed more than 2,000 teams to date. We have a technical manual and 2 books. So that's the model. All right, so that's the background. Now I want to get into the good stuff. And talk to you about how we brought both those lenses, individual differences, and the rocket model to play in some consulting and work that we did with the senior executive team. And this is a large global company, 70,000 employees. They are global. And we got called in to work with the CEO and his team of direct reports. And what had happened about 18 months before we got involved is that company did a spin-off. And the part that got spun off took all the old executive team with them. The CEO and everybody left. And so even though the company was old, the whole executive team was new. CEO had been with the company for maybe 2 years before he got the top spot. Most of the other people had been around for a while, but they were all new to their role, and they were all new to working together. And so when we initially met with the CEO and the CHRO, what the CEO said is, okay, well, the team's really not gelling, we're having some issues. And his perspective was that the people on the team were not really stepping up and operating at the right level. That they were really kind of stuck about protecting, their function, their division, and not thinking about the entire enterprise, really kind of playing that enterprise leadership team. And so, he was really kind of frustrated with where they were at. Now, he left the room, and the CHRO said, and they are frustrated with him too, and the complaints about him were from team members is, look, we have a lot of experience in the room. He discounts everything we say. He's making decisions in a vacuum. He doesn't know the business as well as we do, but he is not really giving us a seat at the table or listening to our input. He is making commitments to the investment community and to the board that we think are totally, unrealistic. And so, we're not on board with where he's trying to take the company. So that kind of was our start. Anything else you want to say about the initial?
No, but we've never seen a situation like this where the whole executive leadership team was gone. Just gone. 15 people.
Yeah.
Gone. So pretty much everybody got promoted from within.
Yeah.
But
they did.
But the deal was, what the frustration was, most of the people who got promoted, they were very, very used to driving strategy.
Yeah.
They got orders from above and said, you guys just need to drive and implement. So these folks could implement like there's no tomorrow. But now they're at a level where, oh no, you need to come up with the strategy.
Yeah.
You need to figure out what the right culture is. You need to figure out what the right structure is to pull, to make the strategy work.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so yes, that's a good point. So when our solution in working with them was actually really, I love this project because it was working with the team and helping the team be more effective. But because they were all, newly promoted, new to role, we also had the opportunity to get involved with the development of each individual executive on the team. It was really cool, team and individual development. So I want to just talk you through the initial diagnostics we did. We had them do the team assessment survey, and then we also interviewed every member of the team, confidentially, and we wrote a report that kind of summarized what we heard. So I realize this is very hard for you to see, so I will just tell you some of the key issues. So one is, I mentioned, buy-in was really low on the team, did not believe that they were really going to accomplish what the CEO said that they were going to do. The other thing that happened is, again, people were working in silos, they weren't collaborating effectively, their meetings were terrible, essentially they got together, they flew from all over the world to have full day meetings once a month. And they spent their time together really looking at a bunch of PowerPoints. They didn't allow enough time for discussion, they didn't make decisions, very frustrating for them. Another thing that they said is the courage was really pretty awful too. They were, for whatever reason, like afraid to express disagreement and to speak up in the room. And so there was a dynamic that they would play, let's say sacrificial lamb. And so, one person in the meeting would, disagree with the CEO or challenge his assumptions behind, what he said was going to happen. And everybody in the room would just kind of like watch. And then after the meeting, they'd go, oh yeah, I totally agreed with you. I feel the same way. But did not have the guts to actually, to do this in the room. So it's pretty interesting group. All right, so let me tell you what we did in our intervention with the team. So in the first session that we did, we got a half day, their full day meeting, and we went in and we shared with them their team assessment data and also all the interview summary. And we gave them a chance to process that. So reactions, of course, were like, well, we knew we were bad, but like, wow, 10th percentile, that feels really awful. So they were, motivated to do something about it. And while the results were bad, they also owned them. They didn't, try to say like, well, this doesn't feel right to us. They did admit they had issues. And it is always amazing to me that you can have a group of people who are executives, right? They are executives at a very large company who are afraid to speak up, but that was the case. So we put them in small groups and have the small groups kind of process the information and then report out, probably a process that you use as well. So no one had to actually own anything. They'd say, well, my group thinks, that, whatever, we should work on whatever. And we had them, rather than focus on, how they sucked in the past, to focus more on what their aspirations were for how they wanted to be functioning and what they saw as their highest priorities for changing in how they work together. And that's really what we accomplished in that first half day. The next month we went back and we worked with them on shaping future meeting agendas. So we said, okay, we're gonna change up the agenda. What are those big issues that you need to be talking about that you haven't been? Got those listed, how much time do you need to spend on them? Great. So we laid out agendas for them. Another really small tweak that we got them to do was, okay, if you're making decisions, let's agree on what those decisions are, not leaving the room until like, this is what we accomplished during this day, here's the decisions we made, here's the actions coming out of the meeting. Small tweak, but it was really making a lot of difference. And then the other thing that we had them do was to make personal commitments to the team. Okay, so again, teams made up of individuals. The team is not going to get better all by itself. Everybody in the room needs to show up and do something different. And so we had them make public commitments to, what their part was in helping that team be better. The third month we went back and really facilitated their working through some thorny issues, and it was really around the strategy that they needed to be presenting to the board the following month. And just kind of getting them on the same page, giving them space to kind of talk through what their disagreements were. Okay, so hold that thought. That was our work with the team over the course of a few months. Meanwhile, we're also working with the individual leaders. And we put them through the Hogan assessment battery. So they took the four tests. We also had them complete a 360. So they got feedback on their leadership. And then we also had them complete, or their teams complete, a team assessment survey. So remember, they all took a team assessment survey for that top team. And now we had their teams also take that same survey. So maybe they didn't feel quite as smug then, right? As pointing fingers at the CEO, because they have their own results to deal with. So we spent a full day with each of them, going through the data, helping them craft a development plan, and then we followed up. We had discussions with the CEO and the CHRO you know, just summarizing like the main themes that they were going to work on, and those were very productive conversations, and I think went a long way to creating more open dialogue between them and the CEO. All right, so 4th month, I want to just tell you a little bit about how we brought then those two lenses together, right? Because we've been working with them, individual differences, we've been working on the team process. And in the 4th month, we went in, we had a full day for the team offsite, and they had just completed presenting their strategy to the board of directors. It had gone really well. So they had made a lot of progress on clarifying their mission. And now the question was, okay, so you've got your strategy, your line, you know where you're going. Do you have the right culture in place? And we had them rate the MVPI scales as to current culture in their organization and what it needed to be to support the strategy. And so that was really eye-opening. You know, where were they? Where they needed to go? They needed to be more risk-taking. They needed to be, I say, higher power, like hold people accountable, get stuff done, quit being so nice all the time. That was another thing. I know there's one more that they needed to work on. Oh, affiliation. Oh, that was a big one too. So they had been used to kind of working in their silos, especially in the big regions, and they needed to be working together more effectively. And so affiliation was another area where they just needed a lot more cross-functional partnership. So we tied that then to their group results, and you know, guess what? They had like an average score of 30 on affiliation. They were lower on power and higher on security. And we made that link then for them between, you know, who they are as individuals, the culture that they set on that executive team, and the implications then for what happens below them, and how they needed to start at the top if they were going to drive that culture change. We also shared with them their Hts Group Results, and if you can guess, like if there's one score that this group of 14 scored over 70 on, score 73, what would it be? Leisure. Ah, that's so good, because I had teed that up, but it was actually reserved. It was actually reserved, right? And that had to do with, okay, they all came onto this new team, new roles, new boss, totally stressed out, so what are they going to do but put their heads down and like focus on their own little silos and not communicate? So that had really played out as well. Gordy and I are not typically real big on the experiential ropes type stuff, but in this full day offsite we did manage to do a few fun things, and then also some personal sharing on journey lines, which is kind of them sharing at a pretty intimate level key life events that really shaped who they are today. And what we heard was, you know, that if we had started with that sort of exercise 4 months earlier, they would not have been ready, right? But they had made progress together as a team, and there was like the beginning of some trust that allowed them to do that. So anyway, that is how we kind of wove those two lenses of the rocket model and individual difference together in our work with that executive team. And I want to turn it over to Gordy to talk about a couple other consulting scenarios.
Yeah. So Diane and I have done this with about 200 teams now. But before I do that, you know, we have very different approaches in terms of building teams. All right. So you've heard Diane's approach, which is much more humanistic. You know, really get to understand the individuals, just understand the team, kind of work the edges, and kind of get the team where it needs to go. This is Gordy's approach.
All for us. Line up, learners! Now! You're going to learn to be true dodgeballers. Then you've got to learn the 5 D's of dodgeball. Dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. If you master the 5 D's, no amount of balls on earth can hit you. Quarterback, go ahead.
Me? Yeah. Shouldn't we learn by dodging balls that are thrown at us, or?
That's what this sack of wrenches is for. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. What?
All right. Yes, it's happy hour. All right. No, but we take two very good, well, not two different approaches, but as Diane alluded to, we're not the touchy-feely people when it comes to building teams. Our fundamental approach is you build teams by having teams do real work. All right, so we will do experiential exercises once in a while, but it's, I can count on a hand how many times I've done it in the last 3 years. All right, now, by far the most powerful team intervention is the one that Diane just talked about, where we're combining individual assessments, individual work with real dynamic team coaching. There is a fundamental limitation to that approach, however. Okay, I got a bunch of smart people in the room. What's wrong with that approach? Not what's wrong with it, what's the limitation of that approach? All right, just like at church, nobody's going to raise their hand. Okay, now this company, we have Amy, what did I hear? Yes, from the back, yes.
I think sometimes in my personal experience is that sometimes when I'm coaching an individual, what's good for that individual in line with their goals or what they want, sometimes causes more conflict on the team. Like their individual goals and development needs are not always aligned with the aggregate needs.
Only if they have a high goal score, all right? No, so that's absolutely right. But here's what I think structurally is actually a much, much bigger limitation. This company had 70,000 employees, all right? Big company. And I know many of you work with large companies. Now, kind of a rule you can use to kind of just guesstimate the number of teams in a company is multiply the total number of employees times 0.2. All right, so you're talking now somewhere between 10 to 15,000 teams. I'm going to be 10,000 years old by the time we get done working with all those teams. All right, so the real fundamental problem here, I think, when we do that kind of work, is that it doesn't scale. It just doesn't scale. There's hundreds, tens, thousands of teams in any organization, and the reality is, any of us can only touch a half a dozen or 10 a year, really, in terms of any kind of in-depth work. So we have to think about how can we get this to scale. And the problem is when you look at leadership development, that's the next thing I want to talk about. How do we use the tools in leadership development? When you look at leadership development really kind of falls into two camps. One camp, or one of the modules, or some of the modules we end up doing is around self-awareness. You guys know this better than anybody. And that's a really, really, really important part of leadership development. And then there's a series of skill building pieces that go with it. It's around, okay, how do we properly interview somebody? How do I set goals for an individual? How do I coach an individual? How do I manage their performance? But the reality, almost all of those modules are very focused on working with an one-on-one with a direct report. I will tell you, just about any organization you go to, you will not see anything about how to build a high-performing team. All right? There are no classes about how to build a high-performing team. Leadership is a team sport. And I think the way we train leaders, we kind of force them into what I call a hub and spoke model. We're going to train you how to deal with people. I'm going to deal with Nathan, I'm going to deal with Darren, and I'm going to need to deal with Jennifer. We don't talk about how you deal with this group in total. All right, and that's a big miss. So we were working with a company a couple of years ago. Kind of a unique, you guys all know these guys, I can't say who they are. But it's really kind of a unique company in that there are about 8,000 people now, very, very successful financially, been around for about 35 years, had never done anything in leadership development. Anything. Virgin territory. But God, perfect. All right. What was really interesting about it, the top of the organization said, we want to train all of our people leaders to be better leaders of teams. We want to train them how to build teams. So the head of talent management did this thorough review of what was out there and ended up coming to us and said, okay, we can help you with this problem. But they have a couple of other interesting dynamics about this organization. So one was, this will be the first program we're going to actually train people on how to build teams. What are the blocking and tackling skills needed to build a team? The way the organization is run, the Centers of Excellence build programs. Nobody out in the field has to use those programs. It's completely voluntary. you've got to convince the people out in the field to buy their programs if they're going to use it. All right, the second thing, CHRO was very, very explicit about this. CHRO said, look, I do not want to delegate the ability to build high-performing teams to HR. Because you know what will happen? We'll end up training a bunch of leaders, and then they're going to have to do a bunch of team offsites, and they're going to bring HR and our outside consultants to do the work that we're going to teach them. Not going to happen. If we're going to teach you how to build teams, we expect you to use it. All right, and if you use this stuff, we're going to come back a year later to find out how well you're actually doing. All right, so it was kind of an interesting model in that they hadn't done any leadership development before. They're going to have to convince the field to use this stuff, and they're not going to get any additional scaffolding from HR to actually use it. It's completely up to them. Now, when we think about teams, kind of three things I think we really need to do if we want to teach leaders, now in this case leaders, how to use the blocking and tackling skills needed to build teams. You need a roadmap. Diane talked about the roadmap, the rocket model. You need to provide leaders with insight. How do they tick? All right, and just as importantly, how do their teams do? And then we want to give them tools. All right, we want to give them tools. We've got to teach them, okay, here's what you need to do in order to improve team performance. Feedback alone is not going to be enough. Now, I want to focus on this last piece because we've heard a little bit about the first two. Working with Wendy, RT, kind of putting up the next generation of the rocket model book. All right, and how much time you got? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? I saw you.
Yeah, 2, 3.
2, 3.
2, 3.
That's confident. Okay. All right, so we got a new book coming out. Okay, and it's going to replace the rocket model book. All right, so if you've seen the rocket model book, you know the rocket model book is sort of written around the components of the rocket model. There's a chapter on context, there's a chapter on mission. This book's going to look different. All right, so this book, here's what the chapter outlines essentially look at. And we're looking at different team dilemmas. Because basically when people search on the internet, they're going to say, okay, I got to build a team. They're not going to look up the rocket model. You know, nobody knows what the rocket model is. All right, but what they are going to look at is I want to do a search around, well, how do I launch a new team? Or how do I work with a virtual team? Or how do I got these two teams coming together for a reorg? How do I put them together? And how do I make this work? All right, so we're trying to be very, very solution-oriented here. When you guys get calls, chances are there's going to fall in one of these first 10 chapters. All right? What we're trying to do is give you a roadmap in terms of, okay, you got a situation like this, here's some things you can do to help this team operate at a higher level. Now, in addition to these chapters, we've actually got, this is your eye chart test, we've actually got 40 different team improvement activities. All right, this is not no touchy-feely, namby-pamby stuff. This is like, okay, if a team's got a real problem around X, around making decisions, or if a team's got real problems around getting people motivated for the team, or doesn't have enough resources, or has unclear goals, this is specific. We walk through very specific, detailed instructions about this is how you actually do it with the team. Here's how you actually help this team solve this problem. Step-by-step instructions, all right, in the book. On our website, the Rocket Model website, we actually have PowerPoints, handouts, forms that coincide with the instructions. So we're really trying to build a toolkit for leaders and facilitators and consultants to use to help build high-performing teams. Because right now, I don't think that's out there. Just a real integrated toolkit. And you'll notice some of these tools involve the HPI, involve the HDS, involve the MVPI. All right, so basically what we've got is we've got this big palette of tools now, or we've got this big palette of tools that we can use to provide to team leaders, to provide to team facilitators, to provide to trainers, to say, how do we help you teach leaders how to build high-performing teams? And we stitch them together to put together, 1 to 2 day leadership development programs. All right, this is our standard day and a half offering. You can see that we start the program off with a lot of self-insight pieces, trying to figure out who this person is as a leader. And then we start talking about this notion of followership, which I think is very, very important, really, really not talked about much in the literature. One, for leaders to understand what's going on in terms of followership, and that's the transition over to teams, where we teach them what about the rocket model. We give each of them feedback. So if I've got 30 of you in a class, each of you have done your team assessment survey on your teams back home. Everybody in that program is getting feedback about their teams back home. So let's talk about how your personality traits, bright side and dark side, and your work experiences are playing out in terms of the kinds of teams you lead. You got a high performing team, an average performing team, low performing team. All right? And we go through a series of activities. This is a very interactive class. Very interactive. The last thing I like to do is lecture. Okay. We've actually run about 5,000 leaders through this program now. Various shapes and forms. Some are a day long, some are a day and a half long, some are 2 days long, some are embedded in the larger programs. But we can train leaders on the blocking and tackling skills needed to build teams. That skill is no different than teaching leaders coaching skills, teaching them interviewing skills. We can do this. All right, now, scenario 3. So one way we can help teams is by working with intact teams. But again, very, very powerful, but doesn't scale. Another thing we can do is say, okay, look, we got 1,000 leaders in this organization. How do we train them how to build high-performing teams? All right, that scales. The last thing we can do is maybe we can make better decisions about who should be leading. You know, when we think about high potential or just selection decisions in general when it comes to leadership roles. How can we do a better job picking high potentials? All right, now let's talk a little bit about this. How many folks, everybody's seen the 9 box, right? How many folks have actually sitting in on a calibration meeting with a client? Scott has? Not many people have. All right, so what ends up, if you don't know, what ends up happening with one of these things is, key leaders in the organization are asked to identify their talent. All right, they're asked to look at the people in their organization, typically it's leaders, all right, and populate the 9 box. They have to rate everybody in terms of the extent of their, how well are they performing, and they have to rate everybody in terms of their potential assessment. And essentially what ends up happening is you get a scatter plot. You get people's names in these different boxes. All right, that's how succession planning typically works. All right, now let's talk about 3 different ways you can do that. All right, method number 1, most common, so it's behind door number 1, manager's nominations. All right, in this case, the manager has complete control. The manager is going to be doing what we call the performance ratings across the bottom. They're going to be doing the potential ratings across the left side, and they're going to be coming up with the 9 box. What's the problem here? Well, as we all know, and you guys all write about all the time, managers are lousy judges of talent. They're horrible at it. I mean, you guys know better than anybody. All right? And, confidence and sucking up has become much more important than talent. All right? The wrong people get put on the upper right corner of the quadrant. It's usually the people who suck up to the boss who end up over there. All right. Lack of standardization, lack of familiarity. Artificial harmony is really interesting because oftentimes you've got people from different divisions who have to present their people. They have what's called a calibration meeting. But the reality is half the people in the room, or if not more, don't know the candidates being evaluated. And so they don't want to waste any chits because they may think, well, that person's really not very good. But oftentimes artificial harmony will break in because they don't want to lose any political points with the rest of the people in the room, and they'll just go along with whatever people put up there. All right? So this is a very, very bad approach. And what we are seeing in some of our initial research here, looking at hypos, is something like this. All right? So what we've done is these were all people from here. This is real data. These were all people in the 9 box. This box right up here. High potential, high performance. What we were able to do is get their TAS results. These are TAS percentile scores, all right, across the different components. The TQ score is the average across the 8 components. That's all it is. It's just a quick way of summarizing how is their team doing overall. I also assign this score to the individual. This tells me, is this leader capable of building a high-performing team? So these were the best and brightest of a financial services company, and we've done this 3 or 4 times now with their hypos, where we had their TES results. We didn't have any Hogan results. We just had their TES results. And what you end up finding is that 2/3 of that group are below average in terms of building teams. What are we grooming hypos for? Strategic, big, jobs that typically involve teams, jobs that they can't get it done by themselves. And I venture to guess if we ended up getting their HBRI, HPI, HPS results, it would look like this too. All right, it would be disaster. They're picking the wrong people to be hypos. So how do we make this better? One way to make this better is let's add personality and mental abilities to the mix. Let's actually look at data. What a concept. All right? Better predictors of leadership effectiveness. Absolutely. All right? Fair to employees. Absolutely. All right? More insight into candidates, more transparency. Yes, it is a little bit more expensive. Okay? But the biggest problem is actually number 2. When Johnny's on the hypo list, he's seen up in the upper right box, and his scores all look bad. The manager's first response is to discount the data. That stuff really doesn't matter very much. You see that over and over and over again. All right? And our managers are losing some control. All right? So you'll see resistance to this, but this provides much superior results than the first approach. There's something missing from this, though. What you don't know here is even when you add personality and mental ability results, you don't know if these people can build teams. They may be uber individual contributors. All right, so we need to add that piece to the mix. So we think a better approach, even better, is adding TQ, adding team data to the mix. Let's add personality. Do they have the right stuff from a personality perspective? Are they bright? Can they build teams? Okay, let's look at that. Let's look at that picture to see if that results in better predictions. All right. Again, many of the same pros as before. It is going to be more expensive. All right. There will be some administrative challenges because you've got to get all these folks, their teams to fill out the TAS. That's harder than just doing self-ratings in terms of the HBI. And managers, again, are going to discount data. It's going to be harder to discount data, though. All right? There's more data to work with. This is what it looks like in a real practical sense, folks. So we're recommending, we've got a client that we're actually doing this with right now. All right? They came to us, we've been working with them for about 8 years now, and they've grown from $100 to $500 million company. All right? And they finally got to a point where they're large enough, says, we want to start building a high potential program, but we want one based on data. What should we do? And so we're actually using this as we speak. So we're having all of the candidates take the HPI, HBRI, HDS, and the team assessment survey. All right, all the candidates are doing that. All right, and we're starting to look at results that look a little bit like this. Here are 3 candidates. Here are 3 candidates, and you can see what their managerial potential scores. That's what we're using. You can see what their managerial potential score looks like. You can see what their HBRI critical reasoning score looks like, their TAS TQ score, and then we're averaging the 3 of these together to get an overall potential score. And you can see candidate number 1 has the right personality, not so bright. Can't build a team. Candidate number 2, not so good on the potential side. HPI results not so good. Really bright, all right? Not so good at building a team either. Candidate number 3 has all 3. You know, good bright side personality stuff, smart, has a track record of building a team. They know how to do it. And essentially what we're doing is, because managers are nominating these folks, you've got a little bit of the manager perspective going on here, you've got self-ratings going on, and you've got a view from below. And a lot of the stuff I know Scott's been writing about, RT's been writing about lately, with humility, you know anything about level 5 leadership, you know anything about leadership effectiveness versus successful leaders, that below side matters. People below know whether or not you should get promoted. All right? Now, we're also, with the HDS, we're also doing something called an overall risk calculation. How risky is it to promote these people? Are you taking a big, like candidate here, these don't necessarily correspond, but candidate here had no dark side traits above 90. All right, so if you just go with the rule about over 90 is high risk, the more dark side traits you have, the more likely something's going to happen. We're using that methodology. And because we have 11 dark side traits, we're just multiplying those dark side traits times 9 to come up with something close to 100. So it comes close to what the percentile scores look like in terms of potential. And you can see you got 3 different types of candidates here. I didn't do my math here. Well, I did this math well, but anyway, my next one doesn't turn out well. But anyway, you can see with each candidate, you can get, here's what their potential looks like across these 3 different instruments. Here's what the derailment risk looks like. So if you promote person X, here's the risk you're going to run. And the individual results look something like this. So here's somebody who had an overall potential score of 75, which is a great score. Top 25% of potential. Their managerial, HPI managerial score was 50. HBRI was 100. Kicked butt on the HBRI. TQ score on the task was 75. You put the combination together, that gives you the 75 overall. Here's where my math wasn't very good. Should have been 45, but anyway. But you can get a sense, if you have a 1-page description of the individual with their picture, their education, their experience, their performance ratings. Now here's the potential results. Now we have to have a discussion about where they got placed on the 9 box. And everybody's got that picture. That makes for a lot more tougher explaining if somebody's saying, hey, I think my guy's in the upper right corner and their overall potential score is 25 and these scores all suck. All right? They have to do a lot more explaining to justify that. And I think that's going to end up, because we're using, everybody wants to make data-based decisions unless, of course, it affects their personal decision and gets in the way.
Yeah, well, this is, I'll say, a firm of engineering-type people, too, so they love data. So they're very receptive to this.
Yeah. Okay. So, what we've talked about today, just wrapping this up. Who is on the team? You want to know who is on the team, you have to use an individual differences approach. That is by far the best way to go. You guys know more about that than anybody. But if you want to know what a team is actually doing, how it's actually behaving, you probably want to do a practices and processes approach. Are they on the same page about what the purpose of the team is? Does the team have clear goals? Do we have good rules in place about how we make decisions? You probably got to go with a practices and processes approach. Why a team is ineffective? Well, here's now where you want to use the combination of the 2. Because clearly what's going on in terms of group HPI data, group HDS data, what's going on in terms of a team assessment survey where you have really low scores in context, or you have really low scores in norms or talent, is going to inform what is going on with that team, either from an individual difference perspective or from a processes and practices perspective. You'll get both of them. How do we help teams improve? I think by having a model. All right, having some sort of agreed upon model. This is what high performance looks like on a team. Because I guarantee you go to 15 different leaders, you will get 15 different answers about what high potential or what a high performing team looks like. They will not agree what it looks like. All right, so have a model. Here's what high performance looks like on a team. Use a combination of individual and team assessments. And use field tested activities. Those activities I had earlier in the new Ignition book, those are all field tested, folks. This is not Gordy making it up. I've been using some of these for 25 years now. These work. These help teams solve real problems. All right, now we're going to open up the Q&A, but I have a question for you first. Who is this? Ooh, let's see how smart this group is. Come on now. I'm back to my college professor days.
That looks like an astronaut.
Yeah.
Who? What? Buzz Aldrin. You can see what I expect for product placement from you. All right. Now, if you look closely, I don't know if you can see this, but we had to ply Buzz with a couple of drinks first before we got him to do this. All right. Now, any questions for Diane and I about the individual difference or the process and practice approach to teams? Working with intact teams, using these 2 sets of perspectives for developing leaders, for training leaders, or also for selecting leaders. Because I think the hypo thing I talked about, that could be used for any leader. It could be used for any leader, if it's an internal promotion sort of thing.
I have a question about none of the above.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's relevant to people in this room. We got a lot of calls for help with team building. And a lot of them do want a touchy-feely, happy time experience, which is not what you get. I mean, you're doing real work with teams. My question is about just in that sales process, how do you weed those out? What do you do? Do you do something when they just really, they say, we've got 2 hours, we want to do something? Do you just say, go fly at Myers-Briggs? Or,
Yeah, we do. I mean, we're at a point now, where we should say that. We don't, that's not how we add value. You know, there are plenty of people who do. I think the two biggest things we run into that get in the way of actually doing really good teamwork, helping organizations improve teamwork, there's 2 things we run into. So one is exactly what Scott talked about, where everybody thinks team building is this fun and games bullshit, all right? It's not. I mean, if you really want to build teams, you've got to really figure out, okay, how are we going to work together? Who's going to do what? What are the rules around accountability? You know, so you've got to work through those issues, all right? And you can't do that on a ropes course. The second thing I think is really problematic, I think it's in the way when we think about building high-performing teams, and this affects both of us, is, well, I want to build a team, I want to get my team better, I have to hire an outside consultant to do that. Yeah. All right? I think that's the wrong approach. Now, I think we as consultants add a whole bunch of value, but I think it's with certain teams. I think for the hoi polloi, I mean, for a lot of other teams out there, we have to teach leaders how to do this themselves. There are teams that are critical to strategy execution. There are teams at the top of the house. There are teams that are leading functions that we should all play a role in. External consultants can play a really important role in that. But, you know, lower down in the organization, we should just be teaching leaders the blocking and tackling skills needed to build teams. We should not get involved with that. And, you know, Diane and I have turned a lot of that stuff down. It's like, it's not at our level, it's not appropriate. But I think the other piece there's 3 actually, the other piece that really gets in the way about us doing teamwork, and this is what we're finding on the TAS, so we've done about 2,500 teams around the globe now, is that on a 5-point Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, 5-point, leaders overrate their teams by a point to a point and a half. That's a really consistent finding. Now, obviously there's individual differences there. Some are pretty accurate, some are underraters, but generally speaking, leaders are thinking, I'm pretty good at this damn team stuff. I am really good. And their team's saying, no, you really suck, and this is all we're talking about around the water cooler. All right, and so that gets in the way of actually doing more team stuff because they already think they're really good at it. Believe me, it is shock and awe when they get their TAS results. Great question, Scott. Other questions? Yes?
So after you do these big sessions with these companies, is there ever like follow up with like employee surveys or like turnover rates and productivity, stuff like that? Like,
yeah, so I'll give you a story about a man named Jed. Now, give you a story. So one of the companies we ended up doing this with, and this was where we ended up doing some team interaction stuff, working with a couple of the top teams, but then we ended up training all 1,000 leaders in the organization. You know, so there were 1,000 leaders in the organization. We trained all of them how to build high-performing teams. Their revenues had been growing at about 4 to 5% a year for the last 3 or 4 years. Very, very steady, very good growth. The market conditions were pretty much the same. Their growth this year was 9%. No new product releases, all right? No differences in market conditions. No differences in the competitor landscape. Something happened, and I completely understand criterion contamination, believe me. Something happened that caused their growth to go up by 9% as opposed to the 4 to 5% they had been seeing 3 years before that. All right? The chief commercial officer and the CHRO completely attribute that to teams. We are doing a much better job of building teams. And what we know is when people get feedback, they share the feedback with their teams and actually work on the teams, those percentile scores go up about 30 points. So I think it works. Now, believe me, if I could make a story of that, make that public and share the name of the company, you know, we'd be selling a lot more books. I can't do that. And I don't know if that's true, but that's certainly what they believe.
We'll take it. you know.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing that we do, like on that executive team, we will go back next winter and reassess as well. So yeah, we do follow up.
Yeah, and even some of this, well, different story. Go ahead. Other questions?
I think it's Bruce.
Yeah, it is Brewski time. So
Do you get into like conflict resolution between team members and things like that?
yeah. So here's the biggest problem with conflict on a team. So that's Jim. Yeah. So exactly. So here's the biggest problem with conflict on a team. The biggest problem with conflict on a team is not too much conflict. Yeah. It's too little. Yeah. You know, our line is polite teams get polite results. And this is a big, big problem with top teams. Boy, I tell you what, the need to get ahead, or the need to get along is so powerful on top teams. And so many times the conflict resolution stuff is not around how do we help, you know, some team playing dysfunctional family feud get along. It's really more around how do we make sure you guys have the right conversation, because you're not talking about it in the room, but believe me, when we go down to the bar afterwards, you're talking about it. It's really more along that issue.
And there are times, though, where you've got somebody who's just a real a-hole on the team, and we help the leader make the right decision then, that the person doesn't belong on the team anymore.
Yeah, there's many top teams we've worked with, you know, after we've done our due diligence in terms of the team survey and interviews with the team, where you say, look, the first 3 things you're going to do is fire person A, B, and C before we get started with any kind of team building. Because otherwise it's just going to be useless. It will be useless.
I don't know how often you assess with disciplines in your TS, but for when you do, how frequently do you see a misalignment, say where they scored well on personality but not so well in TS, or vice versa? Is it usually pretty much a pattern of alignment?
Well, let's put it this way. You know, if you think about, of course, we could probably have some arguments about this one. But if you think about it, if an organization's talent management system is working right, you know, if doing what it's supposed to do, it should have the best, you know, there should be corporate Darwinism going on. The best and brightest should make it to the top, if it's working right. And so usually what happens when you get to the top of the house, most of those people have pretty good bright and dark side stuff going on. They've learned how to control their dark side. They're not stupid. I mean, there are some that are dumb, but most are not. So the reality is most top teams are filled with A players. You know, most top teams, all right? Most top teams are highly dysfunctional. You know, so they are because they're too big. As Diane said, this is a big problem. I mean, we were working with one team with 25 people. You know, top teams, my notion about top teams and team size, it's Hotel California. You know, if you know the song Hotel California, you know, you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. All right, somebody gets on a top team, all right? There's a reorg that goes on. Now they actually report to somebody on a top team. Well, they don't get let go. They're still on the top team. And before you know it, 4 years later, they started with 10, and now they got 25. Because nobody ever gets taken off a top team. Once you're on, you can't leave. So.
Yeah, and I just think they're really careful about, you know, making enemies. And so the discussion at the top is like so politically correct, and don't say anything that might make anybody angry, because they come back to bite you in the butt. So they just really don't tackle the important issues. I think that's a dysfunction that we tend to see at the top.
Yeah, but most top teams, you know, the bright side looks good. Yeah. Dark side, yeah, they're there, but they're usually under control, and nothing but alpha males and females. But they can't play nice. And the reality is, if the top team doesn't play nice, the rest of the organization doesn't play nice. Other questions? Ooh, Miller time.
Miller time.
Thank you so much, Diane and Gordy.
Yeah,
for
thanks for having us.